The United States is sending a ton of weaponry over to Ukraine, but isn't really letting the Ukrainian military use those weapons to their fullest potential. The White House unilaterally put mandates in place prohibiting the use of U.S.-made weaponry on targets located within Russia. According to the Biden administration, it's trying to prevent the conflict from escalating into World War III. But the times, they may be a-changing. Texas Representative Michael McCaul peppered Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the White House's restrictions and reminded Blinken the weapons package passed by Congress recently made no mention of any restrictions.
Will you change this policy so Ukraine can fight without one hand tied behind its back?
And the New York Times is reporting Blinken, after making a trip to Ukraine, is now lobbying the White House to lift its restrictions on the use of U.S. weapons in Ukraine, at least in some instances. Here's why. So this map is a recreation of the map that Representative Mike McCaul was using during the House Foreign Relations Committee hearing. It's based on information and data compiled by the Institute for the Study of War. Here you can see obviously Ukraine, this is Russia up here, this shaded area right here is Russian-occupied Ukraine, which of course includes Crimea down here in the south. Now, these dotted line, hashed line, and solid line all represent the different ranges or the distance that some of the weapons provided to Ukraine from the U.S. have. This first line, this dotted line right here, that represents the maximum range of HIMARS rockets. That's a distance of 48 miles. The second line up represents the maximum line of the mid-range ATACMS missiles, which is a little over 105 miles. It's 105 and some change, so we'll just round it. And this last line, that solid line, represents the maximum known range of ATACMS missiles, which is a distance of 186 miles. This is for the furthest known ranges of ATACMS missiles. Now, as of this recording, Ukraine still cannot use any U.S.-made weapons against targets on Russian soil, which means Russia is massing most of its troops within these zones right here. So you're going to have all sorts of Russian artillery, Russian missile launchers, Russian bases, air bases, all sorts of formations and command centers and logistics hubs, storage depots, weapons caches. It's all pretty close to the front lines. They're able to be repositioned pretty quickly, but relatively safe, somewhat speaking, because the Russians know Ukraine is not allowed to use its most powerful weapons on targets, Russian targets, inside Russia. If Ukraine does use those weapons on Russian targets, the U.S. is going to cut those off. The Biden administration, has clearly said that Ukraine can't do that. Now, it's important to remember Ukraine does have the ability to hit targets deep in Russian territory, and they have, but those attacks are mostly with slow-moving drones that don't pack the same sort of punch as the U.S. weapons do. And Russia is getting better, at least, at stopping those slow-moving drones anyway. This is why, according to Representative McCaul and former State Department staffers and others, they are all lobbying the White House to not just arm Ukraine with the weapons it needs, but let Ukraine use those weapons the way they were intended, by destroying as many Russian bases, launchers, aircraft, ships, troop formations, and other targets as possible that right now are safe from Ukrainian attack in large regard. Also, in addition to removing the restrictions on weapons like HIMARS and ATACMS, the White House may also be reconsidering how it lets Ukraine use air defense missiles as well. This shaded area right here in northeastern part of Ukraine, this is all area that is at risk of getting hit by Russian glide bombs. I've reported on these things before, so if you want more information on those, please check out that story, san.com. Glide bombs are allowing Russia to essentially destroy entire Ukrainian towns and villages without having any boots on the ground in the area, so to speak. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, kind of left the door open a little recently on the possibility the U.S. may let Ukraine start using American-made missiles to target those Russian jets that have been dropping the glide bombs and operating relatively safely behind Russian lines. So those jets operating safely, the time may be up on that if you kind of read between the lines on what the SecDef was saying. So for more of our reporting on the war in Ukraine, be sure to download the Straight Arrow News app today, or you can check us out over at san.com. For Straight Arrow News, I'm Ryan Robertson.